The walls that listen, they told us the hospital was abandoned. The guide's voice cracked as he said it, but his flashlight beam never quite touched the walls, as though he was afraid they might answer back. The building rose before us like a cathedral, its windows black hollows staring down at the trespassers foolish enough to cross the rusted gates. The air smelled wrong, like mildew and something faintly metallic, something old enough to taste before it reached your nose. No one spoke as we stepped inside. Our phones couldn't hold a signal, and the only sound was the groan of the door shutting behind us, too heavy for its own hinges. The corridor ahead yawned into darkness, and I swear the air grew colder as if the building had just inhaled. Somewhere above, a door slammed. Not hard, just enough to let us know we weren't alone. The corridor. The first hallway felt endless, its tile floor a checkerboard of grime. The light from our flashlights made everything look worse, not better. Peeling paint flaked down in soft curls like the walls were shedding a skin they no longer wanted. Each doorway we passed was labeled with neat brass numbers, but the rooms were empty, stripped to plaster and shadow. They called this the recovery wing, our guide said, the word recovery wobbling in the silence. His voice was swallowed by the walls. This is where they kept patients they believed could be helped. I didn't like the past tense. Something scuttled across the hall ahead of us. Too fast to see. Not a rat, too quiet for that. My heart thudded against my ribs, and when we reached the spot, there was nothing there. Just a door ajar, its small wired glass window cracked into a spiderweb. Inside, the walls were covered with something scratched into the plaster. Not words, just gouges. Hundreds of them overlapping until the walls looked furry in the light. Patience, the guide whispered. They used to take away anything sharp. Guess someone found a way anyway. The smell, the deeper we went, the worse the air became. That faint metallic tang thickened, curling down the back of my throat until I could almost taste rust. The others started covering their noses with their sleeves. The guide led us into a ward large enough to have been a dormitory. The ceiling was high, the windows barred. The rows of bed frames still stood stripped bare like iron skeletons. Someone had tied a single bedsheet into a crude noose and left it hanging from a pipe. The fabric had stiffened with age, but it swayed slightly as though stirred by breath, though no breeze reached us here. Stories say a patient hanged himself here, the guide said, trying to sound casual. But, official records say otherwise. We didn't ask what the records said. No one wanted to know. The records room at the end of the ward, we found the records room. The door was splintered open. Its lock twisted like something had forced it from the inside, not the outside. Inside, cabinets lay toppled, their drawers spilling yellowed papers across the floor. The files were soft with moisture, the ink running like tears, but some names were still legible. Look at this. One of the others held up a file folder. The cover marked experimental subject. Inside was a black and white photo of a boy, maybe 12 years old, his head shaved, eyes too large for his face. The notes were clinical. Subject given compound X17. Persistent hallucinations observed. Recommend continuation. The folder slipped from her hands and landed face up in the dust. That's not even the worst of them, the guide said, and his voice was shaking now. The sound, that was when we heard it. It came from somewhere deep below us, faint but distinct, a dragging sound like metal scraping across concrete, once, twice, then silence. Basement, the guide said hoarsely. But when we asked if we were going down there, he didn't answer. His flashlight beam trembled across the floor, stopping at a square metal hatch half buried in dust. Its handle was smeared with rust or something darker. The sound came again, louder this time. Whatever was below us had heard us too, and then, as if on cue, the hatch handle turned. The group stands frozen, staring at the hatch as it slowly creaks open, something breathing heavily from the darkness below. Below, the silence. The hatch opened no faster than an exhale, yet somehow too fast. The hinges shrieked as if they hadn't moved in decades, and a puff of air rose from the darkness below, cold, damp, and foul in a way that made my eyes water. It carried something like spoiled meat wrapped in the sweetness of rot. The smell was old enough to feel alive, as though it had been waiting. For a moment, no one moved. Then the guide did something I will never forgive him for. He smiled. The descent basement's not on the official tour, he murmured, almost gleeful, but neither is the truth. Before any of us could object, he swung his legs over the edge and started down the ladder bolted to the wall inside the shaft. The metal groaned under his weight, shedding flakes of rust that rained down like orange snow. His flashlight beam swung wildly below, carving shaky ovals of light in the darkness. I didn't want to follow. Every instinct screamed no. The air coming from the hatch felt heavier, like it carried weight as well as smell pressing on my lungs. But the silence from below was worse. No footsteps, no muttered curses from the guide, just silence thick and waiting. So I climbed down. Because of course I did. The shaft swallowed the dim light behind me. My hand slipped on the cold metal rungs, slick with condensation. The others followed reluctantly, their feet scraping above. The deeper I went, the more the air felt like standing water, stagnant and cold. It was the kind of cold that didn't just touch your skin, it remembered you. The morgue we emerged into a corridor of brick. The walls here were slick, beads of moisture collecting and trailing down like tears. The ceiling was low, forcing us to stoop. A single rusted rail ran along the wall at waist height. Below it, a channel in the floor glistened faintly, like something had once been washed down it. This was the original morgue, the guide said, as if announcing a guest room. Rows of body drawers lined the walls, square iron mouths yawning open where their doors had rusted away. Some still held the remnants of linen shrouds, brittle as moth wings. The smell was stronger here. Not the sharpness of death, but something musty and sour. The echo of too much time and too little air. My beam caught on a handprint. It was smeared across the inside of one of the drawers. 5 black streaks dragged down the metal. The size was wrong. Too small. A child's. Place shut down in the 80s, the guide said absently. But they kept some patients down here long after. Overflow. Quarantine, they called it. He didn't look at the handprint. I couldn't stop looking at it. The recordings passed the morgue. The corridor narrowed to a single door marked Archives. Restricted. The sign had rusted through, the words barely readable. The lock had been forced long ago. Inside were shelves sagging under the weight of tape reels and crumbling file boxes. Cassette players sat in a heap, their plastic warped by damp. The guide brushed dust off a reel labeled Session 12. Dr. Kadar, Subject 9. Want to hear it? He asked. None of us answered, so he did it anyway. The machine crackled to life, its wheels whining like reluctant bones. A voice emerged, faint under static. Subject demonstrates continued disassociation. Administering compound Delta again, there was a scream. Not loud, but piercing in its purity. It was cut short by a wet, choking sound, followed by a child's voice, barely a whisper. Please, stop making me forget. The tape cut out with a pop. No one spoke. The silence that followed was worse than the tape. It was the kind of silence that didn't wait for sound, it devoured it. The crawl space we should have gone back. Every instinct knew it. The air was colder now, every breath clouding white. But the guide was grinning, eyes shining with something that wasn't curiosity. Something closer to hunger. Almost there, he said. We didn't ask where. At the far end of the archives was a low opening, half hidden behind a fallen shelf. The bricks around it had been clawed out from the inside, as if someone had dug their way toward the hospital rather than away from it. The space beyond was barely 3 feet high. We crawled. The walls closed in on our shoulders. Our knees slipped on the damp floor. The air grew so stale it felt chewed. My light flickered just for a moment, but in that moment I saw something move ahead. A silhouette stooped and still watching. When the light returned, the space was empty. We kept crawling because backward was worse. The door with no hinges. The crawl space opened into a small, round chamber lined in smooth black tile. In the center stood a door. It had no hinges. No handle, no frame. Just a seamless metal sheet set into the wall, marked with a single etched number. 0. The tile around it was scorched, as though it had been burned from the inside. Not on any blueprints, the guide whispered. His face had gone slack, his grin gone. They called it the 0 ward, but no one was supposed to find it. No one was supposed to leave it. We asked what that meant, he didn't answer, because the door opened on its own and there was something inside, something standing very, very still. The 0 ward yawns open, revealing a figure motionless in the darkness, and breathing. The 0 ward, the figure didn't move. At first I thought it was a statue, just a human shape left to rot in the dark, but then it breathed. Shallow and dry, like air escaping old paper. Its head tilted almost imperceptibly, joints creaking. and in the cone of our flashlights its skin shimmered faintly, like wax melting and solidifying all at once. The guide whispered, "It's not supposed to be here." I wanted to ask what it was, but my throat wouldn't work. The room that waited. The zero ward was small, too small to hold the weight of its presence. The walls were smooth, black tile from floor to ceiling and warm to the touch though the air was freezing. The space had no corners. Every angle had been rounded off, giving the sense we were standing inside something alive and trying very hard to pretend it wasn't. The figure stood in the center, facing the door. Its clothes were hospital issue but fused to the skin as if they'd grown there. Its eyes were shut. Its lips moved silently at first, then faintly, forming words without breath. The guide stepped closer. "Don't," I whispered, but he did. The figure's eyes snapped open. They weren't human. Not anymore. They were milk white, threaded with faint black fractures like spiderweb cracks in porcelain. Yet behind them, something flickered, as though light were trying to push its way out from inside its skull. It smiled. That was the moment I realized it had been pretending to be asleep. The voice without sound. The figure never made a sound, but suddenly all of us heard it, not with our ears, with our minds. "You are not here. You were never here." The words bloomed like mold inside my head, soft and invasive. My vision blurred. The room spun. My knees gave out and the black tiles seemed to ripple under me like liquid. I smelled something sweet, too sweet, like spoiled fruit. And for one terrible second I saw the others from above, as though I was looking down from the ceiling. My own body sprawled among them. Then it stopped, and the figure was gone, just gone. The black tiles where it had stood were slick with condensation, steaming faintly in the freezing air. None of us spoke, not because we didn't want to, because we couldn't. The words just wouldn't come. They dissolved before reaching our tongues as though language itself had been scrubbed from our minds. We left the zero ward without deciding to. Our feet just foofed. The long hall. The door shut behind us with a hiss and the sound jarred something loose in my memory. I was sure that the crawl space we'd entered from was only a few feet long. But now as we stepped back into it, it wasn't a crawl space anymore, it was a hallway. Long, endless, too long to fit beneath the hospital. The black tiles had spread here too, seamless and warm. My flashlight beam vanished into darkness without ever hitting the end. "This isn't how we came in," one of the others whispered. Their voice cracked like old vinyl. The guide didn't answer. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the color from his eyes. He kept walking, faster, then faster still until he was nearly running, muttering under his breath. The walls began to hum. Faint at first, then louder, like bees trapped inside the bricks. The sound vibrated through my teeth. The hallway sloped downward. The chamber of faces, we burst out of the corridor into a wide circular room. It was colder than the morgue. The air crystallized as we breathed. The walls were lined with mirrors. At least I thought they were mirrors, until I realized none of them showed our reflections. Instead, they showed faces, hundreds of them pressed up against the glass from the other side. Pale, blank-eyed, mouths opening and closing in perfect silence. Some were children, some were impossibly old. None of them blinked. "Patience," the guide breathed, his voice thin with awe. "They said they disappeared. They never disappeared. A mirror cracked. One long fracture split down the center, releasing a hiss of warm air. The face behind it grinned. Its teeth were too many, too sharp, and far too familiar. It was my own face. The memory leaky backed away. The others were gone, not vanished, just no longer real. Their forms blurred at the edges like smudged photographs. I remembered their names, then didn't. I couldn't recall why we had come here, only that leaving was impossible. My flashlight flickered, and in its strobe I saw the mirrors peel open like eyelids, the faces pressing through as if the glass were skin. Something touched my shoulder. The guide. His face was wrong now, stretched thin, eyes clouded. His mouth opened too wide and too slowly. "They put the memories here," he whispered, voice echoing inside my skull. "They couldn't kill us, so they filed us." He began to laugh. It was the sound of paper tearing. And then he simply folded. His body collapsed inward like an origami figure crushed by invisible hands. One moment he existed. The next he was a flat smear on the black tile, fluttering like ash in a non-existent wind. The faces on the walls began to scream. Silent, shaking screams that shivered the floor. The mirrors fractured outward in spiderwebs. Black liquid welled from the cracks, creeping toward my shoes like spilled ink. I ran. I didn't choose to, my body just decided. The door that shouldn't be. The hallway returned, but shorter now, curling around on itself like a Mobius strip. My legs burned. My mind felt full of static. The hospital above felt like something I had imagined. At the end stood a door. It was painted red, flaking in curls, normal, ordinary. It shouldn't have been possible down here. I threw myself against it. It opened. Light, natural light, spilled through. Sunlight so bright it stabbed my eyes. The smell of grass and rain rushed in. For a moment I was free. I stumbled out, blinking in the daylight, and found myself standing in the main lobby of the hospital. Everything pristine. No dust, no rot, reception desks polished, lights humming, footsteps echoing down bright corridors, and behind the desk the receptionist smiled and said, "Welcome back. You've been here the whole time. The hospital is alive, rebuilt, and functioning, yet no one remembers arriving, or who they were before." The hospital remembers. The receptionist's smile was impossibly calm. Her teeth were too perfect, like they'd been sculpted from porcelain, and her eyes didn't blink so much as shudder, a mechanical flutter. "Too fast to follow. You'll need to sign back in," she said. My voice cracked. "We were just in the basement." Her smile didn't falter. "There is no basement." Behind me, the others stood silent. Too silent. Their faces looked waxy under the white fluorescent glow, as if the color had been leached out of them. They weren't breathing fast anymore. They weren't breathing at all. The admissions ledger, the receptionist slid a massive ledger across the desk. It was bound in black leather so worn it looked soft, as though it had been handled for centuries. The pages were filled edge to edge with looping handwriting, names scrawled in fading brown ink. Every name was crossed out, line after line. Tens of thousands of them, each slashed through with precise strokes. The pen she handed me was ice cold. The tip gleamed like a surgical needle. "Sign," she said. I didn't. I let the pen clatter to the floor. Her smile widened slightly, too wide. Then she reached under the desk and rang a brass bell. The clear metallic chime cut through the air like a scalpel, and every corridor door in the lobby unlocked at once. The sound echoed too long, bending like it was being stretched, and from the corridors, they came. The staff that should be dead doctors, nurses, orderlies, all dressed in spotless white uniforms, marching in synchronized silence. Their eyes were as pale as frost, their mouths thin straight lines. Their movements weren't human, not stiff, not mechanical, just perfect. Too perfectly timed, like puppets on one invisible string. One stepped close. His badge read Dr. K, the same name we had heard on the recording in the archives. "Welcome back," he said. His voice was warm, familiar, terrifying. Because I recognized it. It was my father's voice, though my father had never set foot in this place. "You've made great progress," he continued, as though reading from a script. "But it's time for your treatment." Hand seized my arms, cold, firm, neither cruel nor gentle. The others didn't resist. They went limp as the staff took them, faces blank and serene like patients being wheeled to surgery. I struggled. My voice rose, broke. "We're not supposed to be here." Dr. K smiled faintly. "You've always been here." The white corridors, they pushed us down endless white corridors, each intersection branching into more, every hallway identical. I lost all sense of direction within seconds. The air smelled sterile, sharp with antiseptic. The silence was total except for the whisper of rubber soles on tile. But something was off. The walls, flexed. Not much, just enough to notice out of the corner of your eye. The seams between tiles shifted, almost breathing. When I brushed my hand against the wall, it was warm. It throbbed. I jerked away. The orderly pushing me smiled without moving his lips. My chair rolled faster. We passed doors labeled with numbers, no names. Tiny observation windows revealed glimpses of patients inside, sitting motionless, eyes wide open. Their faces were blurred. Not hidden, blurred like my brain refused to resolve them. And worse, One of them wore my jacket. The therapy theater. They wheeled us into a cavernous room shaped like an amphitheater. The walls were lined with mirrors and the floor was polished so bright it seemed liquid. In the center stood a single operating chair bolted to a steel platform, leather restraints dangling from its arms like lazy serpents. The staff began humming. Low droning, tuneless. The sound made the room vibrate as if the walls were humming back. Dr. K approached with a clipboard and a thin silver needle. His eyes glimmered. "Today," he said, "we restore continuity." The others were placed in chairs around me, their restraints buckled with crisp, efficient snaps. Their faces were slack, serene, already dissolving into calm. I jerked against my restraints until the leather bit my skin. "We're not patients," I hissed. "We're visitors." The humming rose, blending into words too distorted to understand. Dr. K leaned close enough that his breath frosted my cheek. "Visitors don't come here," he said. "They are made." And he plunged the needle into my temple. The split light. Blinding, endless light. It wasn't like passing out. It was like being peeled, layers of myself flayed off in long, clean strips. Memories came loose, not erased, but unanchored. I saw my childhood bedroom, my first kiss, the car crash, the funeral. None of them felt mine. They floated like photos someone else had taken. My name slipped next, not all at once, just syllables breaking apart until they were meaningless sounds. Somewhere, through the glare, I saw the hospital walls pulsing, ribs expanding and contracting like a colossal chest. The whole building breathing, and threaded through it all, a voice. Calm, soothing. We are the memory that remains when the patient is gone. The world snapped back. I was still in the chair. The restraints were gone. The room was empty. The others were gone, and Dr. K stood alone in the center holding the needle, now dripping with something black and shimmering. "You're almost ready," he said. The reflection I ran. I don't remember standing. I just remember running. Down white halls that bent like bone, past windows that looked into rooms full of people who had my face, sitting motionless. My footsteps made no sound. The corridors twisted. The walls began to peel, shedding white plaster and curling ribbons to reveal red brick beneath, old, wet, and breathing. My lungs burned. My name was gone, and then I saw the mirror, full length, silver framed, standing in the middle of the corridor like it had been waiting for me. I stopped. Because the thing in the mirror wasn't me. It wore my shape, but its skin was translucent. I could see veins crawling like roots beneath the surface, black and glistening. Its mouth was sewn shut. Its eyes were wide, pleading. It raised its hand slowly. Words bloomed across the inside of the glass, written in dripping black. "You are the last one left. Leave and you become me." And behind me, footsteps slow, heavy, coming closer, trapped between the impossible reflection that claims to be his future and something massive approaching from behind. The footsteps behind me grew louder, slow, measured, like someone pacing through a dream they'd walked 1,000 times. The mirror still showed my translucent twin, its mouth sewn shut, its eyes begging. My chest heaved. I didn't know who I was running from anymore, or if I was running from myself. The split corridor I bolted. The corridor split into 3 directions. All of them sloped downward. The walls bled from white to gray to black as I ran, tiles shedding like scales. The overhead lights stuttered in random bursts, turning my sprint into a series of still frames. Wall, floor, blackness, wall again. Each flash showed the halls in different states, sometimes pristine, sometimes rotting, once burning. A whisper rose from all 3 tunnels at once, layered and discordant like a choir underwater. "Come back to bed." My legs buckled. For a blink, I saw myself lying in one of the hospital beds, tubes in my arms, eyes taped open. A doctor, maybe Dr. K, was sewing my name onto my chest with black thread. I kept running. The gravity well. The floor slanted until it became a slope. Then a slide. I fell. The walls blurred by, streaks of brick and light. Wind screamed in my ears. My own voice joined it. Then the slope flattened into a vast black chamber and I tumbled across tiles slick with condensation until I slammed against something metal. When I looked up, I realized what it was, a bed frame, then another. And another. Hundreds of iron bed frames stretching into the dark piled atop one another like a graveyard of rust. Their mattresses were gone, but faint impressions remained. Dents shaped like human bodies, some twisted as though they'd died mid-struggle. The air was still. Dead still. Then the whole chamber breathed. Every bed frame creaked at once, shifting an inch as if moved by a single pulse. Dust rose in a ring. The air grew warm. I smelled bleach. And from the dark between the bed frames something rose. The memory husket was tall. Too tall. Its head brushed the ceiling beams, and its body was stitched from scraps of hospital gowns and restraints, hanging loose over a skeleton too thin to be human. Its face, no, not a face, just a smooth plate of glass. A projector mounted on its chest flickered to life. Light spilled across the glass face, playing an image like a movie reel. I saw myself lying in a hospital bed, eyes open, unblinking, a tag around my wrist. A nurse writing on a chart. Subject shows complete compliance. The husk tilted its head. The reel jumped. Now I was screaming, thrashing, foam on my lips. The nurse calmly adjusted the restraints. The reel flickered faster, showing 100 versions of me, laughing, sobbing, drugged, blank, catatonic, feral, gun, and behind the images a faint whisper from the husk's chest speaker. We made so many of you. The beds began to rattle. One by one, their iron frames rose upright like bones assembling a skeleton. The husk took a step toward me. The floor cracked under its weight. I ran again, but this time, the floor moved with me. The spinal hall, the chamber funneled into a narrow passage. Ribs of exposed rebar arching overhead like the inside of a spine. The walls pulsed wetly. My shoes stuck with each step. Black liquid seeped between the tiles, warm and syrup-thick. The air hummed with voices. Thousands of them. Children whispering math equations. Old men reciting apologies. Women screaming lullabies. They rose and fell like breath. And threaded through them all. The steady metronome click of a typewriter. A door loomed at the end of the hall. It was shaped like a vertebra. Polished white. Bone. Letters carved into its surface read, Core. Active. My hands shook as I pushed it open. The memory engine inside was impossible. A black cylinder the size of a cathedral rose from the floor, its surface crawling with copper wires like veins. Rows of ancient tape reels whirred around its base, each labeled with a single word. Joy. Anger. Father. Home. They spun at insane speeds, tape rattling, sparking faint blue arcs, and around the machine floated people, at least what was left of them. Human silhouettes hung weightless in the air, their skin flickering like film negatives. Faces dissolved and reassembled in cycles, flashing different identities each second. Children, soldiers, patients, strangers. Their mouths moved in sync, whispering. We forgot who we were to remember what they wanted. I stumbled closer. My name pulsed faintly on the nearest reel. Redacted. I tried to tear it free. The entire machine screamed. The collapse. The cylinder split open. A column of black light shot upward, tearing the ceiling away like paper. I saw every floor of the hospital at once, dozens stacked vertically like cross-sections of a dollhouse. Every room was full. Patients sat frozen in their beds. Doctors moved on endless loops, repeating the same motions. A nurse poured water that never reached the glass. Time wasn't moving here. It was stored, cataloged like the tapes. And through it all, the hospital's voice, vast, layered, motherly, and merciless, filled my head. You were never visitors. You were copies. The originals are long gone. We only kept what was useful. The floating silhouettes snapped their heads toward me in unison. Their eyes ignited, white hot. They lunged. I bolted for the opening where the ceiling had torn away, climbing on the spinning reels like steps. The copper wires lashed at my legs, searing cold. The tape screamed fragments of my life. Birthdays, funerals, faces I'd loved and lost, all crumbling as I touched them, disintegrating into black ash. The voices rose to a single shriek. The assenti burst through the ceiling into the old wards. But they weren't old anymore. Fresh paint gleamed on the walls. Beds were neatly made. Sunshine spilled through open windows. Laughter echoed faintly down the halls, and every patient walking calmly past me wore my face. Dozens of me. Hundreds, all smiling. All serene, Dr. K stood among them, clipboard in hand, beaming like a proud parent. "You see?" he said gently. "Continuity achieved." They all turned toward me, and they all spoke at once in my voice. "Join us." The floor cracked beneath me. Light, pure white, spilled upward from the fracture, searing and silent, pulling me down like gravity inverted. My body lifted off the ground, weightless. My duplicates stepped closer, arms outstretched like they were welcoming me home. Dragged into a white void by hundreds of perfect smiling versions of himself. As the hospital erases the last boundary between patient and copy. Continuity, the white void was silent, not empty, silent. The kind of silence that isn't absence but pressure, like the air was holding its breath. Hundreds of them stood around me in a perfect circle, all my face, all smiling. They reached for me with identical hands, and as they touched my skin, I felt pieces of myself flicker and vanish like blown fuses. Birthdays gone. Childhood room gone. Mother's voice gone. Their words overlapped into a rising chant. Continuity. 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 And behind their smiles, I saw the black thread stitching their mouths from the inside. The return of Dr. K, the circle parted. Dr. K stepped through, immaculate in his white coat. He wasn't smiling now. His face was carved from something older than flesh, ageless and steady as if the idea of expression had been scrubbed from him long ago. "You've wandered far," he said. His voice wasn't sound. It arrived fully formed inside my skull, bypassing my ears like a memory I hadn't made yet. "I want to leave," I said, though I wasn't sure whose voice I used. "There is no leaving," he replied gently, "only finishing." He reached into his coat and pulled out the black admissions ledger. The same one from the lobby, except this time it was blank. "You were the last unfinished file," he said. "We kept you incomplete, so you could choose." The word choose echoed like a crack in glass. The Hall of Origins, he gestured, and the void folded like paper. Suddenly we stood in an ancient hallway carved from dark stone, lit by oil lamps that burned without smoke. The air smelled of mildew and iron. Framed portraits lined the walls. Sepia photographs of men in old medical coats, women in starched dresses. Their eyes followed as we walked. "These were the first custodians," Dr. K said, "before the hospital had walls." We passed rooms behind glass where early experiments played like silent theater. Children in cages, their mouths held open by metal clamps while doctors dripped black liquid onto their tongues. Soldiers convulsing under strobing lights. Nurses sewing names into the skin of patients' forearms. "Why?" I whispered. Dr. K's eyes glimmered. "To end suffering," I almost laughed. He didn't. They believed if they could extract identity, peel away the self like bark, then the mind would be cured. No memory, no fear. No fear, no pain. We stopped before a massive iron door. Its surface was carved with hundreds of names. Every one was mine. The architect. The iron door opened inward on its own. Inside was a single wooden desk. A man sat behind it, older than time it seemed. Skin as pale as wax, veins like faded blue ink. He wore no coat, no badge, just a black suit cut in a style centuries out of date. He didn't look up. He wrote in a thin leather journal with a quill, the scratch of it echoing like distant screams. Dr. K bowed his head slightly. The architect. The man stopped writing. He lifted his head and I saw my face, older, emptier, eyes like abandoned buildings. "You've done well," he said. I couldn't breathe. "You're not real," I whispered. "Neither are you," he said calmly. "You were grown from my last fragment, the part of me that wanted to remember." He turned the journal toward me. Each page was filled with perfect sketches of me. Every expression I'd ever had. Every wound, every laugh, every dream. "You were the control subject," he said. "The final attempt at continuity. We copied my mind into the hospital and waited to see if you would find your way back." "I'm not you," I said. His smile was slow. Patient. "You are what remained. The choice." The architect rose. As he did, the walls of the room cracked and peeled away like old paint, revealing blackness stitched with glowing copper threads, like veins in a cosmic corpse. "You may leave," he said. "Walk through that door." He pointed to a bright rectangle of light behind me. "And return to the world. But you will go back hollow. Your memories will stay here. You will not know your name. You will not know you were ever here. And if I stay, Then you become the hospital, its final keeper. You will remember everything, everyone, forever. I looked into the light. It pulsed warm, beckoning. Beyond it I thought I saw grass, sunlight, the world. Then I looked at the architect, and at the countless black threads dangling from the ceiling, each holding a faint, flickering human shape. They were all watching, waiting. The last patient. I stepped toward the light. The architect said nothing. Dr. K's face flickered like an old film reel, as if he knew this part always played the same. But at the threshold, I stopped. Something in the air shifted, the faintest breath of cold, like a sigh from the black beyond the walls. And in that cold I heard them, the patients, all of them, whispering my name. Their voices weren't pleading. They were hoping, if I walked away, they would vanish. Every life the hospital consumed would dissolve into dust, and if I stayed, they would remain as echoes, as data, as something. Not alive, but not forgotten. The architect tilted his head. Continuity, he said softly, or erasure. The ending. I turned from the light, walked back to the desk, sat down. The chair fit me perfectly. The journal opened on its own, a fresh blank page. The quill floated to my hand. The architect smiled faintly and faded like smoke. Dr. K bowed and dissolved into paper dust. The black threads above sank lower, gently brushing my shoulders, warm, weightless, familiar. I dipped the quill in ink that wasn't ink at all, but something older, heavier, like the distilled essence of memory, and I began to write. As I did, the white void receded. The corridors returned. The wards refilled. Lights hummed. Machines stirred. The hospital woke, and every patient inside smiled. I was the last unfinished file. Now I am the archive, and no one will ever leave again. That closes the story. A full circle twist, our protagonist wasn't escaping the hospital. He was becoming it.